bit, we want to bring in the U.S. Surgeon General. That's Dr. Vivek Murthy. Dr. Murthy, good morning to you. Thank you for joining us. Back in February, President Biden said that his hope was that by this Christmas, we'd be back to normal. That's obviously not where we are. So with that in mind, what's his message to Americans tomorrow?
Well, Tony, on Tuesday, what you're going to hear President Biden speak to the country about is what we can expect in the weeks ahead, and the steps also that the government is taking to make sure that we do as much as possible to protect people across the country. Look, in the coming weeks, Tony, we are going to see a spike in cases, and that's because Omicron is incredibly transmissible. And, we have to be prepared for that. But there will be a stark difference between the experience of those who are vaccinated and boosted versus those who are unvaccinated. With those who have maximal protection from a vaccination and a boost, you either won't get infected, or if you do get an infection, it will be most likely mild. But if you are unvaccinated, I'm worried about you. I'm worried that your risk of being hospitalized or, God forbid, losing your life to this virus is quite significant. So, it still remains the case that getting vaccinated and boosted is the best way to protect yourself, even against Omicron.
Doctor, as the administration tries to figure out what to recommend and when to recommend it, I'm curious how you're going to be defining success and what measures you think are most important. Is it case count, or, as we've been hearing from other doctors, is it really hospitalizations that we should be paying attention to?
Well, it's an important question, and the most important metrics for sure are whether we are saving lives and keeping people out of the hospital. That's been true since the beginning. It is true now as well. And by that measure, our vaccines are still doing a good job. And you need the booster in particular, though, because with Omicron, there is some evasion of the immune response, not all the immune response, but some of it. But the booster helps restore the protection that you get from your 2 doses. So that is the most important measure. Are we keeping people out of the hospital? Are we saving lives? With that said, wherever possible, we want to reduce the number of infections because we want to prevent people from getting long COVID. We know there are still many people who are unvaccinated, including kids under 5. We want to protect them also from exposure to the virus.
But now we're hearing, Dr. Murthy, about breakthrough cases with boosters. We used to be told that if you get your booster, it provides you maximum protection. I hear you say if you get it, you're going to be okay. But that's still not comforting. You get the booster because you think, I'm going to be protected. Now, how are we supposed to process this information and not be afraid as we look at the long lines of people?
Well, it's a really important question, Gayle. And I just want to say I recognize that with Omicron and all of this news, that this can be a scary time for people. And it can be fatiguing as well, right? We've been at this for 2 years.
Yeah.
But here's how to think about the booster shot. The booster reduces your chances of certainly getting severely ill, and it reduces your chances of getting sick in the first place. But no vaccine is perfect, and especially against a foe like Omicron. We know that there are going to be some people who, despite getting boosted, they may get what are called breakthrough infections. But those infections are much more likely to be mild compared to maybe somebody who is not boosted or not vaccinated, who may have a greater chance of ending up in the hospital. So the bottom line is,
do you have to isolate if you get a breakthrough?
Very well.
If you get a breakthrough, do you have to isolate?
Yes. Yeah,
Okay,
so
Doctor,
if you get an infection, whether you've been vaccinated or not, you should isolate because you're at risk of spreading it to others.
All right.
Doctor, as it relates to COVID, it's oftentimes described as a fight. So sticking with the theme, if I'm watching a boxing match, I can tell who's winning. So I have to ask you, who's winning this fight? Is it COVID or is it us?
Well, we are certainly in a much better place than we were a year ago. And the reason is this. We have more tools in our toolbox. We have the vaccines and the boosters. We know our masks work to reduce spread. Our testing can also be a strategy to make gathering safer, especially important before you get together for the holidays. And we know how important ventilation is now, not something we fully appreciated a year ago. And so when you gathering in well-ventilated places can also make your gathering safer. So we are in a better place with better tools and better knowledge. And that's why I actually feel confident, despite Omicron coming on the scene, that we have the tools to get through this pandemic. We've got to stick together, though, in this process. We can't let this pandemic splinter us.
Dr. Murthy, we're running out of time, but since you mentioned tools and you mentioned testing, there's a conversation we've been hearing about in the medical world about whether all the tests out there, including the antigen test at home, can actually detect Omicron. Are you aware of that conversation? And can you say this morning that all tests can indeed detect Omicron?
Well, we're absolutely aware of these conversations, and in fact, making sure that our tests are working well has been an important priority of the FDA since Omicron came on the scene. The good news is that the data that they've seen so far in their testing has been reassuring, that the vast majority of tests that Americans are using are working and working well. They're going to continue to monitor this. They'll make sure that they
Yeah. Are there certain tests that Americans should be aware of as they go into the holiday gathering period that you should stay away from because they don't work?
Well, the FDA has listed publicly on its website a few tests which it has some concerns about, but those don't include the vast majority of tests that people are buying over the counter in their pharmacies. So the bottom line is, if you're getting an over-the-counter test, this is an important tool that you can use to help you make your gathering safer. And at this point, we can feel confident that those tests are still serving us and serving us well.
Dr. Vivek Murthy, thank you so much for joining us and answering the questions that we all need to know. We appreciate you.